Have you ever had a friend who was going through some suffering? Maybe they had a bad health diagnosis. Maybe they have a marriage that's on the rocks. Maybe they had a friend or family member that passed away suddenly, maybe even tragically. Of course you have. I mean, we all have. And have you ever struggled with what to do to help your friend? I feel like I'm supposed to say something. I mean, that's what friends do, right? But what do I say? You know, we're tempted to use one of those cliches that we hear from other people. You know, the things that people say to us when we're going through hard times, that they heard from somebody else, that they're just passing along because it sounds right. And maybe they're true. Maybe they're helpful. Maybe. But is that really what people need from us when they suffer? Or is there some other way to help? I mean, I don't want to make things worse. They won't miss me if I just don't show up, right? Maybe I'll just stay home. I'm continuing a series that I started a few weeks ago called What's the Point? What's the point? It's coming from the book of Job in the Old Testament. I came up with that title because if you read the book, you ask that question a lot. Like, what is the point here? What's the point of the book? What's the point of Job? What's the point of his suffering? Because he goes through a lot. What's the point of God? What's the point? Little background to catch you up. The book of Job has 42 chapters in it. Kind of a long book. It starts with 2 chapters that are written in one form called prose or narration. It's that storytelling part. And then it's got 39 chapters of poetic form. You know, if you're looking your Bible now at it, you can see that it's set differently than the first 2 chapters and how they set it up in the print. And then the book ends with 2/3 of a chapter back in narration or prose. Now, the premise of the book is the commonly held belief of the day that God runs the universe in a certain way. And that way is that you receive from God now based on how you lived your life now. You reap what you sow. Not later, not in eternity, but now. So if you're obedient to God now, He'll bless your life now. If you're not obedient to God now, He will not bless your life. In fact, He'll judge you now. That was the understanding that people had in Job's day of how God ran the universe. Period. No exceptions. So let's talk about Job for a minute. What was Job's situation? There's this guy named Job. Job is a man of great wealth and great family. He was a godly man, it says, blameless, upright, morally genuine, repenting of his sins, feared and respected God, did all the right stuff. So if anything bad happens to him, it won't be the direct result of some sin that he has committed in his life, because he deals with his sins. He acknowledges them. He confesses them, he repents of them, he turns away from them. He doesn't do them anymore. Now, the beginning of the book of Job, there's a scene in heaven that Job knows nothing about and will never know anything about. But it's all about him. He just doesn't know that it's going on. So in this scene, God is talking to Satan. And God says, you know, Job down there on earth, best of the best spiritually. Can't find a better guy spiritually than Job. Satan counters. By the way, this is just a strange book. If you haven't read the book before, it's so different from the rest of the Bible, except maybe Revelation, but it's just an odd book. So I'll explain it to you. So in this scene, up in heaven, Satan then responds that Job is only living that way because God made his life so great. Everything is so great in his life. I mean, that's why he lives the way he does, God, because you've blessed him with so much good stuff. So Satan says to God, if you take all that away, I think that Job will curse you to your face. This will prove, God, that you don't even have any real followers. People just follow you for what they can get from you. So God, in this scene, tells Satan that he can take away all that good stuff, except he can't touch Job's body. And he does. So in one day, Satan, with God's permission, starts taking away everything that Job has, all his wealth and all of his 10 kids. Everything's gone, except for his wife and his health. Now, again, Job believes that everything that happens comes from God, even the bad stuff. But again, what about the bad stuff that happens as a result of your sin? See, Job hasn't done anything that could cause bad stuff. Even though we're going to find out that's what people are going to think. Job did something. That's why he's going to go through what he's going to go through. Because there must be something back there that he's just not telling us about. Well, was God then wrong in sending all this stuff on Job, all the bad stuff, if Job didn't do anything wrong to cause it? Now grab your Bible. We're going to be in Job. We're going to skip around a little bit. Job 1 and Job 2. That's where we are today. Next week we're going to get into Job 3, but we're just kind of finishing up 1 and 2, setting the scene for the rest of the book. Because to understand the rest of the book, you have to get 1 and 2 down and understand the premise of what's going on. Otherwise, the rest of the book's going to be really tough to understand. Okay, Job chapter 1, verse 21. This is how Job responds to all of his kids dying and all of his wealth being gone. And he's a wealthy man. This is rich guy, Job. All his stuff's gone. Job 1:21. Oh, by the way, there's Bibles in the pew in front of you. You can check on your phone or wherever you want and look at it with us. Job chapter 1, verse 21. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. So blameless Job submits to sovereign God. So Satan and God had this little wager going. Satan now seems to have lost the wager with God. So does Satan give up? Not a chance. God, he says, this test on Job, it was just too easy. I mean, taking away all his possessions and all his children, I'm sure that hurt him emotionally, but not physically. I mean, he can get more of that stuff. He can have more kids. He can get more stuff, more wealth. You didn't allow me to do to Job what's going to really show what he believes about you. So God, Satan says, let me hurt him physically, and I'm sure that he will now curse you to your face. He will show you that he only believes in you because of what he can get from you. Now, although we might stop there and say, well, okay, enough is enough. Let's call a halt to all this. Job has just lost just about everything, and he did nothing to deserve this. Why are we letting this go on? Blameless, upright, full of integrity, avoiding sin. But God steps it up. And he lifts a restriction, and he tells Satan that he can attack Job physically, but he can't kill him. And Satan did it. Painful sores from head to toe. And he is now, as I said last week, excluded from society, unclean, has to be separate, stay away. So he goes out to the only place where you can stay away. He goes out to the city garbage dump, and he sits in the ashes, scraping his sores. And there's only one family member who is left to him, his wife. Chapter 2, verse 9. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Okay, what is the deal with this wife? Why is she acting like this? Job is in horrible, miserable pain, and this is how she helps him? What is going on? So let's look at a couple of things. First of all, let's look at what she says. She questions Job's faithfulness to his God. Then she tells him to curse his God. Then she tells him to die. So what's she doing? She's following the common thought of the day that if you follow God, he will make your life go well. But not only is Job's life not going well, it is horrible as a follower of God. So Job, she says, if God isn't going to follow the rules, then why should you? If God is going to curse you, then you should curse him back. So do you understand? She is, without having heard Satan's words, she's echoing them. She's saying the same thing that Satan said. But she's also following the belief that if you curse God, that's blasphemy. And the judgment for blasphemy is death. So if he curses God, he's going to die. Essentially, she's saying, Job, just sin and God will kill you. Now, if Job listens to her, Satan wins the wager, right? That Job has been following God only for the benefits. But she really believes that there is no value to following God if your life is nothing but pain. In fact, following God only for what you get actually keeps people from living righteously because they're only following for what they can get. They're following God selfishly. And God, if you want people to live holy lives, why are you destroying somebody who's doing it? Because if everybody else hears about this, they're not going to want to do it either. Why should I follow God if what's going to happen to me is what happened to Job? So where's this coming from with Job's wife? Why is she acting like this? Our assumption is that she's a follower of God like Job is. Perhaps she's feeling, not perhaps, I'm sure she's feeling great emotional pain from seeing her husband in such terrible physical pain. It's like sympathy pain. He hurt so much, I hurt so much. When someone we love hurts, it hurts us. Or sometimes, when we see someone in agony, we think, maybe death is the better alternative. They should just die and be out of their pain. Or perhaps it's shock. It's bitterness. Think about what she just lost. It wasn't just Job who lost this. She lost all that she had. She lost all of her kids. She is in shock. She is bitter. Shouldn't she be? And when we go through that, do we really think clearly? Whatever the reason, she tells Job that there is no reason to maintain this relationship with your God, Job, if this is how God is going to treat you, if all you get is pain out of it. So she's gone from being support to adding pain and pressure to Job. So how does Job respond? Verse 10. He replied, "You're talking like a foolish woman. Should we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he says. So Job's response is to say that she's talking like a foolish woman. Now, he didn't say, you are a foolish woman. I mean, he knows he didn't marry a foolish woman. I'm sure he vetted her before they got married to make sure she wasn't. He's saying she's acting like a foolish woman. So if she's trying to inflict pain on Job, he's not doing it back. He speaks the truth in love. He tells her what he has learned about God, that God is sovereign, which means everything comes from him, not only the good, but also the bad. This is coming from a man who's in horrible pain, gentleness and grace when his body is screaming. And it says he didn't sin in what he said. Could it be that not sinning in what he said is not just what he said about God, but how he said it to his wife? He could have called her a foolish woman. He could have blasted her. He could have called her wicked. He could have cursed her for what she was doing to him, how she was making his life even more miserable. But he didn't. And the good side to all this is that it strengthens Job's resolve to continue to be faithful to God. And Satan was not going to win the wager quickly. Now, Job has concluded that he has done nothing to cause this suffering, but Job's wife, as we shall see, is beginning to provide an alternative explanation for his suffering. She's the first. There's going to be more people who say, no, Job, I know what you think, I know what you've said, but let me tell you what reality is. Let me tell you what the truth is. And that's actually going to take up much of the rest of the book, is people saying, no, Job, you're not right about why you're suffering. Let me tell you why you're suffering. There are some other characters in the story. Now let's go to Job chapter 2, verse 11. Job chapter 2, verse 11. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. So Job has 3 friends. Get to know these 3 names because you're going to hear them a lot. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. So those are great names for your next 3 boys. Just kidding. There's a lot of speculation as to where they come from. We're not really sure. Probably somewhere to the south or east of where Job was. Most likely they are also wealthy men like Job who've heard about Job's losses and suffering. They then would have money to make the trip, but knowing how slow news traveled in those days, it's probably a while until they show up, which means by the time they get there, Job has been sitting on the ash heap in the garbage dump of the city for quite a while. These 3 friends, they all know each other, and they agreed ahead of time to meet together, coming from 3 different places before they see Job. Perhaps they want to plan their approach. Maybe they just don't want to have Job have to explain himself 3 times. You know what that's like? When something's wrong, you're in pain, you broke your leg, you broke your ankle, you had surgery, and everybody comes to you and wants a full explanation, even when you're hurting. Maybe they were saving him from that. So these 3 guys and Job had been good friends, business partners probably. And they wanted nothing but the best for the guy. They needed to give him comfort, they were going to give him comfort. They needed to give him sympathy, they were going to give him sympathy. That's what friends do. And we're going to stay with him, maybe a day or two or three, then we'll go home. That's what they expected. That's not what they experienced. Perhaps when they got to the area, they had met together, they decided their approach, and they said, well, let's go to Job's house. That's obviously where he's going to be. Knocks on the door. Job's wife answers. Job's not here. So where is he? Well, he's at the city dump. The city dump. Why is he at the city dump? Now, the city dump, you need to understand, is not like a landfill today. It's not just a place where garbage piles up and gets buried. It was more serious than this. Yes, it was a place where people outside the city walls took their refuse of every kind and placed it there. And they also placed the bodies of those who could not be buried, like criminals. Criminals couldn't be buried. They were taken out to the city dump and they were dumped. And then everything in the city dump was lit on fire, which was burning all the time. Hence the ash. You know, Jesus in the New Testament used the city dump as a picture of Hades or hell. That's where Job was. So what's this blameless man doing in this horrible place? So when the three friends get out to the city dump, still mystified as to why they're there, they start looking for Job, and they can't find him anywhere. We can't find anybody at all. We've looked at anybody who resembles Job whatsoever. So they ask, can anybody tell me where Job was? And somebody points to the guy that they already went by, that they didn't recognize at all. They assumed was somebody else. No, you can't be right. That cannot be Job. That's our friend Job. Our friend Job doesn't look anything like that. That's Job? I mean, we heard that he went through some hard times. But whatever it was he's gone through has turned him into something or someone else that we don't even know. They're shocked. They're stunned. Just to look at him hurts them. They want to turn away. And maybe they do. But they can't stay away. I mean, they came to help. They've come and they've got to stay. And no matter the revulsion or the agony or the confusion that they feel. But what they feel comes out because they see their good friend and they start to weep. And then it says they tore their clothes and they threw ashes on their heads. What does that express? Grief. Extreme, unresolved grief. They are grieving uncontrollably because of what's happened to their friend. They are identifying with his suffering. But it also says that they were with him for 7 days. People in the Bible often mourned for their loved ones when they died for 7 days. So some people think this wasn't helping Job at all. It was merely telling Job, Job, we're here for 7 days because you're as good as dead. It's like saying, Job, we brought your coffin with us. Here it is, so anytime, buddy. We don't really know which version it was. And then it says that they sat with him. Now, we're going to assume the best of these guys. They got down in his level. They were with him where he was. Perhaps it's because they had almost nothing to say to this man who was almost dead. Or perhaps it's because at that moment, what Job needed was not more words, but simply someone being with him in silence. Joseph Bailey and his wife lost 3 young children to death, and he wrote a book called A View from a Hearse. He writes of his experience. He says, "I was sitting torn by grief. Someone came and talked to me of God's dealings, of why it happened, of hope beyond the grave. He talked constantly. He said things I knew were true, but I was unmoved, except I wish he'd go away." And he finally did. Another came and sat by me. He didn't talk. He didn't ask leading questions. He just sat by me for more than an hour, listening to what I said, answering briefly, praying simply, and then he left. I was moved. I was comforted. I hated to see him go. Job has been suffering through what we see is no fault of his own. And I'll let you know that in coming chapters, that's not what other people are going to think. But that's for another sermon. But for now, his 3 friends are coming to help. How did they do it? They just showed up, even when they didn't know what to say. They came with an attitude of wanting to give comfort and sympathy, to ease his pain, to help him bear his sorrow. They expressed how they felt. It wasn't about them. It was just helping him to know that they cared. They didn't stay away, even when they were revolted. They looked beyond what they could see. They got down on his level. And they stayed as long as he needed. And they said only as much as was helpful. Sometimes they said nothing at all. That's what friends do. So when we have somebody in our life who is going through suffering, and we're their friend, and we think there's something that we must do to help them, then maybe Job's friends in this chapter are a good example for us. People often don't want to be fixed. They just want to be felt and heard and understood and loved. The pressure's off of us. You don't have to come up with the right words, because frankly, there's rarely right words. Yes, there's truth, and we can use Scripture and we can use those things when it's appropriate, when it works, but stay away from the cliches. And just get down on their level and stay with them as long as they need. And if we do that, I think they'll miss us when we're gone. That's one way to help people who are suffering. Let's pray.